Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today on caring for our community during COVID-19. I see several of you have joined the webinar, and I'm sure more will join as we go. But before we get into the content, we wanted to just pause, and I wanted to turn it over to Diann Lawson, who's going to be moderating today's session for an important announcement. So Diann, I will kick it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the call. You know, we've been looking forward to this webinar for a while because we enjoy webinars where we can have meaningful discussion on really important topics. So as Camille mentioned, I will be moderating the panel, but before we get started, I just really want to acknowledge that it's been a heavy week in our nation. The pain and the strife and the turmoil that has swept through our communities is staggering. Sequoia is categorically against racism, violence, and oppression of all kinds. We are taking a stand, and we're going to invite everybody here in all of our communities to stand with us, to get educated on the issue, to take action for unity and justice and equality. One of the ways we're learning at Sequoia for how to address this topic is by learning from our own team members. And I'd like to introduce you to one of our team members, Mike, who has some words to share with us. And then we can talk about next steps of the actions we're taking and inviting you to take with us as we proceed. So Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Diann. I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but I was given this platform to say a couple of words. Not many people have a voice, and I've been blessed to be given a minute or two to represent Sequoia, what we stand for and what we don't. So I wanted to use this time and use this public forum to say that we denounce racism, we denounce oppression, we denounce gender inequality, and we denounce homophobia. You may be asking, why am I speaking about social justice when this webinar is about our company's response to COVID-19 and how the two are related. Often when we're too close to something, you can't fully appreciate how large it is in reality. I beg you to step back and look at the larger picture because the two are absolutely related. Our nation is hurting. So many people have been negatively impacted by COVID-19, but none more than communities of color, specifically African Americans. When you watch people that look like you die from a preventable disease at 2 and 3 times the rate of everyone else around you, that starts to take a toll and it starts to weigh you down. And you start to ask why. Just as the wounds of our nation are starting to heal, we witnessed the murder of an unarmed African American. Again, no guns were involved on either side. The only things involved were handcuffs, a knee, 3 officers who swore an oath to protect and serve, cell phones from those brave enough to say enough is enough, and a man lying face down screaming for his dead mother. Unfortunately, what we saw was nothing new. Technology has just allowed us to bring what we all know happens out in the open. This is not an issue that we can solve overnight. And honestly, this was not even a topic that was fresh on my mind because I'm still trying to wrap my head around 113 American souls dying in the last month, close to 400,000 worldwide. But I have children who my wife and I have to find the words to explain why they cannot see their friends and go to school. And now we have to find the words that their young and impressionable minds can comprehend about why, if we don't do something now, they will not have the same opportunities as others who they grow up with. How they'll have to continue to work twice as hard throughout their life just to quote unquote make it. My heart continues to be heavy, which is why it's my duty to step out of my comfort zone enough to be here today. And I'm asking you all to ask yourself how you can help and make a difference. Change only begins by reflecting on your own past actions and learning how to react differently in the future. I didn't want to reflect back on this moment with my grandkids in 20 to 30 years and have to explain why I've been blessed with so many opportunities that are only a dream to those who look like me and did nothing when I had the opportunity to help them achieve success surpassing my own. I did not want to be on the wrong side of history. You all are here today with us because you care about the issues impacting others around you. I'm just asking that you take a second and reflect about what side of history you want to be on. Thank you for your time.
And Mike, thank you so much for sharing with us that really powerful reflection of your personal experience and your call for all of us to come forward. Why don't we go ahead and share with you some of the actions that Sequoia is taking and inviting you to join us on. Our immediate reaction is to say that, in support of training, education, and advocacy at national and local levels for our African American community, and support of the NAACP Empowerment Programs Fund we've created, we're matching every dollar for the month of June towards this fund and towards this organization who can make a big impactful change. So join us, and if you go to sequoia.com, about giving back is the place where you can make a donation, and we'll match that donation out to the NAACP Empowerment Programs Fund. So thank you for joining us there. And then on the next opportunity that we have to take a next meaningful step, on the next slide, is, part of our role at Sequoia is bringing our community together to learn and share our resources. This is such a deep, an important topic. We want to address it at a systemic level. So we're committing to hosting an upcoming webinar talking about racial equality and how we can address this in our communities, at our work, in our homes, and so that we can have a more peaceful path forward. So be on the lookout for that. And now I would like to just transition into today's topic and kick it back over to Camille for some housekeeping.
Thank you so much, Diann, and thank you, Mike, for sharing your perspective. That was really powerful and meaningful, so thank you for doing that. Before we get going, I wanted to introduce myself. I skipped over that at the beginning. My name is Camille Velasic, and I lead Sequoia's events program, and I just wanted to share some housekeeping items about today's session to make sure that the experience is great for everyone. Obviously, this topic is robust and difficult at times to discuss, and so we have a ton of content. So we're going to do our best to keep us on track and move us through the conversation. We ask that you engage with us through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Submit your questions. A lot of times what we'll do is leave time at the end of the session to hear insights from our panelists on your questions. And if nothing else, we'll take those questions back and bake them into future sessions and make sure that we're covering topics that you care about and bringing you content and educational resources that help you better serve your teams and your communities. So I just wanted to clarify, you are all in this webinar in listen-only mode, so you don't need to share your video or your audio. But again, please submit your questions using the Q&A button. And we've disabled the chat just so we can focus all questions into the Q&A, but feel free to add any comments or questions in there as well. And we are recording this session, and so we'll be sharing the recording on sequoia.com/thegrove. And without further ado, let's get into the content for today. I will kick it back over to Diann, who will introduce herself and then introduce our panel of experts for today's session.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Camille. So I'm Diann Lawson. I'm the moderator for today, but I'm also the director of the Sequoia Impact Program. Our goal is to build a connected community for social good and to be able to activate our network in giving back to our community through our actions and our time, treasure, and talent. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to our panelists and talk about them. So I want to introduce you to each person. So starting with Abo, he's the VP of Strategic Partnerships at Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And the foundation really facilitates philanthropic efforts in our community and has deep knowledge and experience. And we're proud to have partnered with them over the past year, and we look forward to continuing to work with them as they have great experience and knowledge on what the real needs are and how we can address them. Next is our partner at We Charity. Melissa Steadman is the head of corporate partnerships for We. We Charity has created a phenomenal platform really that empowers individuals and families and companies to make sustainable change. We've partnered with them for years, and there's a lot of information that Melissa can share with us today. We're grateful to have you here. Next, and joining us here from Red Thread Consulting is Sue Olson. She has deep HR and social impact experience and integrates that in all of her consulting work. And we're happy to have her as panel on our panel as a longtime consultant. She also brings deep experience both personally and professionally in the arena of giving back. Our whole panel collectively is exceptionally bright and passionate on social impact. They have insights into what the real needs are, the nonprofits that serve these needs, the policies that affect our community, and the programs and actions that we can help, that we can take to help solve these problems. So with that, I want to get into the topics that we've prepared for today and start with our first question. Although I'm going to kick it off to you. How would you describe how COVID-19 has affected the needs in our community?
Well, thank you, Diann, and thank you to Camille and the whole Sequoia team for putting this webinar on and inviting us to be a part of it to talk about this topic that is front of mind for all of us. And I also want a special thanks to Mike for his personal reflection at the outset and sharing his stories as well as the values of Sequoia. Really poignant comments to kick us off. And I think part of what I want to talk about too is what Mike mentioned around the connection between this pandemic and its disproportionate effects on communities of color. They are inextricably linked, unfortunately, and we're hoping as we get through this pandemic together, we can unlink the two and ensure we have a society that doesn't discriminate based on race, income, and other factors, so that we can all coexist the way that we want. Now, your question, Diann, about how COVID-19 has impacted our communities and what we're seeing, I think, I'll share some of the headlines that many of you already know, but I'd like to also give a little bit of a more context and deep dives into some areas. But basically, this pandemic has underscored the inequities that exist in our communities, plain and simple. It has also underscored the lack of the safety net, the social safety net that exists in our communities and across the country. And a quick example is that if the majority of our children in the US have to go to school in order to eat, and if school is not available for them for several months, that means they may not eat that day. That's a problem. That's a major, major problem, and it's a reflection of where we're putting our priorities in terms of the social safety net in the US. In terms of the folks who are affected by this pandemic, again, no surprise that low-income individuals, individuals who are undocumented, who cannot receive government assistance, those are the two groups of folks that are most impacted. Nonprofits, of course, are going to be impacted, have been impacted through this pandemic, as they are a critical resource to respond in times of disaster. However, the double impact of not being able to fundraise, but also having to find volunteers who are all sheltering in place at a time where they're expected to respond is a double impact that is affecting nonprofits across the nation. And then finally, I'd say small business owners and employees who work for small businesses have also been disproportionately impacted by this crisis. And I'd love to share a few statistics here, Diann, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just for context, right now, California is right around 25% unemployment. We have almost 5 million folks who signed up for unemployment. It's just California. For context, it took 4 years during the Great Depression in the 30s to get to a 25% unemployment rate. And we got there within a couple of months. Another just quick set of stats related to the disproportionate effect that this crisis has had on communities of color, and Mike mentioned this. In our country, 23% of the reported deaths are attributed to African Americans, yet they only make up 13% of the population. In California, 40% of the cases of COVID-19 are attributed to Latinos. And they are making up a little bit less than 40% of the population. Now you compare that to the white population in California, they make up about 21% of the cases of COVID-19 and close to 36% of the state's population. So this disproportionate effect is not caused by the virus. It's caused by the social systems that we've had in place that essentially create two sets of people: those who can have an income while they work from home safely with their families and not have to go out and be in situations that are going to cause them to be infected. And then there's another group where if they don't go out to try to get work, if they don't go out to care for family members who are on fixed income or bedridden or seniors or any other ailments, then those are the folks that are going to become infected and have to suffer the consequences as a result. The pandemic has uncovered for me two groups of people in our country, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that, I know, in our call. But that's just some context for who this is affecting. In terms of nonprofits, you know, not being able to fundraise because of shelter-in-place issues, like I mentioned before, or shelter-in-place orders, like I mentioned before, is really having nonprofits rethink their whole business model and why they exist, how they exist. And at the same time, they are a fabric of our social safety net and our disaster response safety net. Not every community has a Red Cross ready to go. It's our local nonprofits that are providing food assistance, that are providing transportation to medical facilities, that are providing financial and rental assistance. It's the local nonprofits doing that day to day. So I'll end there and just say, you know, I don't think it's a surprise that, you know, when people of color and communities of color are disproportionately represented in our criminal justice system, they're disproportionately represented when it comes to educational attainment or lack thereof, as well as health disparities. It's no surprise that they're disproportionately affected through a pandemic. And so these are the things that Silicon Valley Community Foundation would like to and has been working on for a number of years. We're also proud to work with over 100 companies locally and nationally around their corporate social responsibility to tackle some of these issues that are coming up time and again and have been underscored during this pandemic. So glad to talk about some solutions as we get through the rest of the conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Avo. And I wanted to extend the opportunity to Melissa, if you have any other additional context you'd like to share on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Diann. And I could listen to Avo speak. I'm sure you amaze me. I know I only met you on Friday, but I'd love to have sidebar conversations with you, learning more and more about what's going on in the state of California and what you're seeing across the U.S. Representing really Canada here, but also a global approach to charity and not-for-profits. You know, with we having our slogan of helping make doing good doable, we work with stakeholders like educators, parents, as you said, Diann, corporate partners, which is a big focus of mine, being the head of partnerships. But really, our commitment is to working with all stakeholder groups to make a difference on the world locally and the world globally. So we're seeing impacts really across the globe with the work we do in developing nations and the work we do domestically across North America. So thank you for inviting me today. I think a theme that we've seen have positive impact on COVID-19 and flattening the curve to some degree in some areas of the world is really around collective thinking and collective action. And we've seen great progress when we come together and we make a difference, and realizing that together we can make the difference. So, you know, I represent the belief that if the right things are in place and we look at what COVID has done to bring light to some of the social issues that we're seeing, you know, locally, and as you say, Avo, in California, but really we're seeing it all across the globe. There's great work to be done when we come together on key issues. And we're hoping, and I know we'll talk about this later, we're hoping that this is not just a one-time impact play, that this is something that lives on when COVID is behind us and the next normal comes to be. But given the different levels of trust in government and media at this time, depending on which way you approach it, business continues to be seen as one of the more trusted institutions to respond effectively. So business truly has that responsibility. And we're seeing some great companies out there making a difference with their employees and in their community. Mm-hmm. So we know that the crisis has really evolved in two ways. It's impacted people personally with, self-isolation, social distancing, physical distancing, whatever you want to call it. But as Avo said, and I think it's important to note, that it really has put an amplification effect on these social issues that are exacerbated or highlighted by the crisis, like the inequalities, the unemployment, the food insecurity, the underserved populations, access to affordable healthcare, which is an important one that I know in the US is near and dear to many's hearts. In Canada, we're seeing it with elder care and some of the issues that we've seen in the long-term care facilities with the hardest hit victims of COVID. Domestic violence is another topic that we're seeing as being prevalent, and there's great work to be done in that space and how we can help people when they're facing crisis, not just every day, but especially in times of a global pandemic like COVID. And then another focus that we has done a lot of work in, working with the education system, but also working with individuals, parents and individuals, youth, which is a big focus for us, is around stigmatization of mental health issues. We know that in times of crisis, because of the disparities and the social inequalities, people will deal with mental health issues on different levels. And it is so important for us to provide the tools and resources and the outlets for individuals to be able to seek the help personally, but also for us to come together and support each other in times of uncertainty, in times of anxiety, and so many of the other issues that come to light in times of mental health and well-being overall.
Wow, Melissa, thank you also for adding there. And Sue, you're welcome to chime in here and add some additional commentary, or we can advance the conversation to the next topic, which is now that we have sort of understood and heard from you on what these deep needs are and how pervasive they are, really, what can companies do to respond to these needs? How can we take tangible, reasonable action without just knowing that these problems exist out in the world, but we can actually do something about them that's effective? So I'll just turn it over to Sue if you want to jump in on that, and we'll just go around the panel.
Sure, thanks. And thanks, I'll echo everyone else. Thanks for putting this together and bringing together the experts. It's great work. So thank you, Diann, Camille, and Sequoia. What I'd like to jump in here, and I always start with, I've been in smaller organizations that are, the 100 to 500. And so normally they are privately held organizations, and I have a platform to begin the social impact or social responsibility program. And I always come in with that point of view. And I would say if I were, I can look at it from a people leader perspective. I think it's super important right now, if you are a leader of people, how you can engage your people. If your organization, if your employer doesn't have a program, you can do that. And then if your employer does have a program, I would encourage you to continue with the opportunities here. I know many people have been distracted. There's been, we've had to learn how to work remote within 24 hours, but I would say now is an opportunity to, really come together and be clever, because there is so much that is going on. As we heard, we had to learn how to rethink. The nonprofits are having to learn how to rethink how to fundraise. So we should be thinking about how do we rethink, how do we continue the purposeful programs that we've had in our organizations. Mm-hmm. And that can be done, there's a lot going on right now. And then also I would say, if you don't have that employer program, I would encourage you as a leader to think how you can lead your team through that, because there's so many studies that say if you are intentional about giving back to others, you're just a better human being, and you actually are more resistant and resilient through times like this because you have that gratitude. And the way I think about it too, as being very passionate about this, I have my buckets of being at the employer level, making an impact there, an impact as a citizen. So for example, if, sorry, there's a public safety going off. As a citizen, so if I'm in front of a grocery store and there's someone, a citizen in the community that is doing a food drive, I feel called to action to participate in that. And then also as a family member. So I break mine down into 3 buckets because otherwise it can be pretty overwhelming. If the employer doesn't have a program, you still can do it as a citizen or as a family individual. So, you know, that would be a takeaway I would say on this is be called to action and figure out the how can I make a difference at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Melissa, I see you've taken yourself off mute. If you want to share with us, what are some real tangible, accessible ways people can take action,
Yeah.
both financially and if say they don't have funds to give back. But if you can express to us some in each category of where you can give, if it's financial or if you don't have the financial means but you still care and want to give back, share with us how.
Absolutely. You know, a big area of employee giving. So, you know, giving, matching grants, donations, and really making that available for your employees to be able to make a difference, for your company to be able to demonstrate a commitment to community. Just general acts of kindness and generosity, you know, simple ways that I've seen with a lot of our corporate partners and some of the what I've witnessed in companies that aren't partners of ours, but really impressive work that is being done out there around just acts of generosity and being able to shift the way they're doing business to serve a need in society has just been incredible. Virtual and skill-based volunteering, which is so incredibly important. We're actually having partners reach out to us to say, you know, how can we help right now? And while, of course, money is always the first thing because we all need it. I think 50% of charities and not-for-profits right now are really at a point where they don't even know if their funding is going to surpass a month of sustainability and understanding how they can sustain their operations, how will they continue to do the social impact that they need to do if the focus isn't there from traditional giving mechanisms that have been in place. But we have seen amazing shifts in people realizing that while they're sheltering in place, while they're the traditional forms of volunteerism may not be there, they're open to new ways of doing virtual volunteering, giving of their time and their skills to be able to help those charities or not-for-profits, the organizations across their communities who are really looking for that skills-based volunteering. So volunteering of their time to help with accounting, creative services, data management, data-based management, whatever it may be. Even the distribution of communications and keeping people informed as to how the changes within the community are evolving as the crisis improves or deteriorates depending on what's going on in what part of the world. But it's really amazing to see what this crisis has done for humanity. And I don't want to, you know, seem like I'm constantly, you know, preaching the whole coming together and it takes a village to really make a difference, but it truly does. It really is going to take all of us, individuals, businesses, government, nonprofits, charities, using our strength and our network to solve the issues flowing from the crisis, and realizing that, you know, and this is kind of our mantra, is moving from me to we, and believing that yes, the individual is important, and understanding what's happening to the individual and how we can help them is important, but really understanding that you're a part of a global community and understanding that your efforts in the collective with others will make a tremendous impact on various causes, but also on humanity. So it's just incredible. So giving of time, giving of money, giving of acts of kindness, and just being there for your neighbor, being there for a colleague, whatever it may be, and asking the questions of like, what is the greatest need? What are you thinking about today? Do you need a helping hand or just an ear or whatever it may be? Those are all things, and I know I'm talking about a lot here. I could probably drill deeper if there was a question that came up, but We're seeing it across the board. People are just really stepping up to say, how can I help? And there are a lot of ways that you can help depending on what the need is.
If you have a program in place, a lot of, us will call them our employee resource group. It might come under that. So you have this social impact group. And I would say, even if you're a large or small, I think where you see the most success is if you do have a group that's called out that way, and that's their intention, and people opt into that committee, and then they begin to have that butterfly effect. And I think the other thing that's really important on these is if you have an executive sponsor, and that's just someone in leadership in the organization that can really influence the culture and the leadership team. And what they're there for is to advocate for budget, for programs, to help with the communication, and also to provide support for resources. So that's the framework that, if someone's thinking about beginning this in their organization, that's a nice way to start it. And that's where you can start to work with the WEs and Silicon Valley community. They can come into your ERG or your social impact group. That's where I've seen success as an employer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I just want to say, if everybody's taking notes fast and furious, that we do have a document that comes after this that will summarize and compile real data and real places you can go for information and for how to take the next steps. So I want to continue on and have Avo comment on how companies can actually take action here and address the needs.
Yeah, thank you. Two really quick thoughts. First is working at Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Like I mentioned, we have a number of clients that we do corporate social responsibility work for, and we see a diversity of plans and impact goals from companies. And one of the things that I'll mention is it doesn't happen often, but especially during this time of pandemic, a lot of corporations are thinking about how to use their voice in the advocacy arena and the public policy arena, particularly because we are really, in a pandemic, we are really beholden to government orders, financial assistance, public financial assistance, and there is a lot going on in the government and public policy sector that corporations and individuals and nonprofits all have to abide by, follow, and react to. And so we're seeing more and more companies looking to see how they use their voice as it relates to advocacy. Now, how that translates to advocacy for social impact is different from company to company, community to community, but that's one thing I wanted to raise. And a tangible example of that is the second point I wanted to make, and sort of to Sue's point, is what can we do as companies, as individuals, to look to see what are the public and private policies that were put in place during the pandemic, during the response phase of the pandemic, that we want to see last beyond the initial phase of the disaster. And one example is many communities have put in eviction moratoriums so that renters cannot evict, landlords cannot evict renters or mortgage assistance and deferring payments for mortgages. So those are examples of policies that may be able to be a platform for stronger rental rights or stronger lending practices, and want to make sure that we're not losing sight of the things that we put in place to help employees and individuals in our undocumented community don't just go away when the economy starts up again. It's not a switch. So I would also say that, as you look at your own private policies around what worked for your own employees while maintaining productivity, while maintaining your own bottom line, what are the things that were put in place that could possibly last beyond this this crisis?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that because that's part of our third question. But before we go and continue on that, I want to reflect on the fact that one of the things I've noted, or that is clear about COVID-19, how not only are we responding to the needs outside the walls of our offices and our homes and out on the street, but we're now trying to respond to the needs of our employees, our customers, our own company's economic impact. So it feels paralyzing, and sometimes that uncertainty causes paralysis. And I just wanted to give voice to one of the things that we've spoken about as a panel in preparation for this call is now is the time to step out. Now is the time to take action, big and small acts of kindness all the way to policy change. And again, we will follow up with content that can show you the way how. But I also just wanted to take a moment and talk about some of the ways that you've seen. Sue, maybe you can speak to this. How are companies taking care of their own employees and their own customers? I want to touch on that for a little bit.
Sure. I think the people that I've been talking to is, one, they start with an engagement survey. I mean, there's the immediate. So I led some companies through layoffs and furloughs, and we actually, when we did that, we were very compassionate about putting together a resource list of even how to get the unemployment, because it had changed. So if you dial this back just even to March, where some people were taking those steps or companies had to take those steps, that's what we were focused on at that time, is get people that were being laid off settled quickly, because that makes a big difference. You know, the people that are left, they have guilt. They're going through a whole range of emotions as they're seeing their team members losing a job, and losing a job where, we've never seen this before. So I think there's the care of those that have, were let go or furloughed, and finding out their needs and supporting them. And then there's your own employees internally too. A lot of needs are happening. And I see the trend that I'm starting to see now that we're, into our third month, is starting to survey a little bit more and asking, where can we help you, instead of trying to second guess it and putting in what we think is right. Everybody has very different needs. And so people are doing really quick surveys that way, and then identifying and helping, and just some with childcare, some allowing employees their understanding that they need to go and be the primary care provider somewhere else in the nation. I mean, I think the best thing that I keep saying to people is, we're all in the same storm, but everyone has a different boat, and everybody's boats has different situations that they're trying to solve right now. So I think it's a time to be very collaborative and listen to the information that's coming in, and then be agile in how you can support. And I was talking to someone yesterday at a company where they do have a social impact. And I said, what have you done with the program at this point in time? And they actually have been moving some of their budget around, because they're not going to be doing some of the on-site volunteer events anymore. And they're repositioning those funds and giving those funds to either organizations that the company wants to give more to, or to their own employees. So I would say that's where you just have to have that fresh mindset of what can you be doing as an employer. You almost have three cohorts. You do have the external, your employees want to see that you're getting involved. Then you have your own employees, and then you might have some of those that have parted, you've had to downsize, and make sure you're taking care of those folks as well. Mm-hmm. Does that shed some light on it? Is that?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know, Melissa, thank you for that, Sue. And I know, Melissa, you guys address mental health, as well as you have some insights on how to care for customers. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So much of what we do is in response, as Sue mentions, to really listening and really asking our stakeholders, our key stakeholders being, like I said, educators, youth, students, parents and families, our corporate clients, and really asking the questions, not once, but ongoing, to understand what they're going through at any given time, where the greatest need for help is, and how we as an organization can respond. I loved what Sue said around authentic leadership, and really understanding the individual approach to the need, as opposed to just a sweeping one size fits all and just hope that it solves it. And well, I guess time will tell type thing. And I mean, I'm seeing more and more leaders taking the approach of more authentic leadership, which is so refreshing and really inspiring for us at WE. As it relates to some of the resources that we've made available, You know, as an organization, we started our digital transformation 3 years ago. So we're well positioned to be able to pivot to more digital for those who were, you know, physical distancing and isolating. So we had an offering that we could make available immediately to the educators, to the students, to the families to do the distance learning for education, where those who were working from home also found that they had to become the educator for the students. From a well-being standpoint, really understanding the resources that needed to be available for you know, parents who didn't know what to do, or teachers who didn't know what to do around, you know, they've now found themselves in a position where they're playing a role that they're just not familiar with and definitely not equipped to be able to handle. So we have resources, we have tools that are available that we're not just dealing with directly, we're making available to our partners to be able to extend to their network. So it really is about making sure the resources are there, they're shareable, that there's links that are accessible by all. And for those that maybe don't have the digital connection, that all, you know, we can't assume that everyone has great internet and great Wi-Fi or whatever it may be. We've been working with partners to be able to extend different versions and formats for those who may not have as much accessibility to the content. We have podcasts around well-being that we've made available, and regular content series just to inform people on the things that are available to them, where they can learn more about the issues that they're seeing within their own community or that they're seeing in the news that's happening around the world. So we see content, communication as being critical, and not once, but ongoing, and creating those forums for people to be able to share information and create networks and community for them to share amongst themselves, where we can just merely be a convener.
Yeah. You know, you bring up one thing to mind. Technology is an issue. You know, the digital divide becomes greater under a pandemic like this, where you really recognize once again the inequity in access to education by virtue of lack of technology. So I know some of the participants on this call are about making technology accessible to all, and we champion those efforts as well. We have in our resources ways that you can give back and give technology and connect training for that technology and give it to a low-income family. So look for that on our content that we provide afterwards. But I want to take a moment before we go to our third question, and quickly, Avo, if you want to take, if you wanted to comment on anything that Sue and Melissa had said about how companies are helping customers or employees.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Happy to move on in the conversation.
Okay, so let's tackle the third one, which is, oh my goodness, going forward, this is an opportunity where we can pivot and go into building a stronger community going forward. And this is really critical that, you know, we've seen throughout history, you know, you can name a topic where we go back and it's like, why did we miss the opportunity to actually make enormous strides in what we're trying to accomplish in our communities for a sustainable equality and fairness for all. And so I want to take a moment. I know, Avo, you're hot on this topic. So how can we build a stronger community going forward?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a couple thoughts around advocacy, but you know, one of the things that this pandemic has also uncovered is the interconnection between our economy and like public education, for example, and childcare, for example. And so thinking that, you know, childcare is a nice to have, not a must have, I think those thoughts are out the window, just because knowing that our economy is so tied to how we care for our kids, how we teach our kids, are they getting fed and educated at public school, allows us to be able to have a strong economy. And I think one of the things that also comes up is you know, this concept of the digital divide, and that many of you heard and have also worked on, I'm sure. But again, underscoring and this pandemic has exacerbated this divide. And so I think one of the things as we go forward is to figure out is this is a really amazing opportunity for us to not just build better, build back better. I'm sure folks have heard that phrase, but build it the way it should have been from the start, right? And build our economy and our social safety net the way it should have been from the start. And a few of the things I mentioned really have to do with public policy, but a lot of what colleagues on the panel have talked about is the little things you can do within your own companies are ways to build things back better. And so I guess my only point here is, you know, how do we bring that build that stronger community going forward? A lot of it's going to be around public policy. A lot of it's going to be about re-examining how our work life is so intricately tied to the rest of our life, around education, around childcare, around caring for our elderly parents. And just knowing that that connection exists will, I think, help us make better informed private and public policy decisions moving forward. The thing that, you know, the discussion around race right now, I think is, if there's any silver lining to it, it is that building our economy and our society back better must have an underlying lens of racial equity to it. And so that has got to pervade and be about everything that we talk about. At Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we're part of, our CEO is part of a recovery roundtable. And she is charged with ensuring that every aspect of this recovery that takes place, that we ensure we have a racial and socioeconomic equity lens to it, and not just go back to the normal. Because like I said, flipping the switch and thinking everything's going to go back to normal is just not reality.
Mm-hmm. Avo, how could companies connect with you on that if they wanted to be part of the conversation and have a seat at the table?
Yeah, I think certainly reaching out to me directly is an easy way to start. Our website has some information on that as well, siliconvalleycf.org. I would also encourage, I don't know if this is the right time, Diann, to talk, you know, in your own local communities, there are some resources too that folks can access. I don't know if you want me to mention those.
Yeah,
but,
sure, please do.
Yeah, I mean, I work for a community foundation, and there are hundreds of them across the country that are intricately linked to the corporate sector, the business sector, the nonprofit sector. And these links that community foundations can make to ensure that volunteering, funding, and advocacy are all geared towards impact, I think is a great place to start. So if you know of a community foundation in your own community, it's a really great place to start to think about how you build your own local community stronger going forward. Mm-hmm. The second is, you know, chambers of commerce. You know, if you're a small business or supporting small businesses, building back better with an equity lens, I think chambers of commerce across the country have really stepped up to figure out how that can be done in a thoughtful way. So those are the two resources. And then of course the nonprofit community. I mean, you want to get it real from someone about what's going on the ground and how your company and your employees may or may not be affected by what's going on the ground. Talk to a nonprofit leader and get their take on it, and they'll give you direction left and right. They do every day to us, and right. It's so valuable. So those are the three kind of points of connection that I would recommend for folks.
And Ava, can you help us understand, how is Silicon Valley Community Foundation connected to nonprofits?
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the largest grant makers in the country, but certainly for the Bay Area. And really a lot of our grant making is driven through our donor advised funds, but we're the ones also advising donors on where to put that money. And we can only advise them on a professional and informed level if we are connected to what is happening on the ground. And so me and my whole team, they are just tasked with understanding the needs of nonprofits, the needs of individuals on the ground, and then relaying that back to corporations, relaying it back to our donors, and ensuring that solid impact is happening. And so and evaluating for it, because we want to make sure that we're getting the most impact for every dollar spent.
Right. So for those seeking, they want to give, but they're not sure which channel or what to dial into and which nonprofit makes the most sense to be more effective for what they want to solve. connection to AVA would be helpful. And of course, reach out to any of our panelists who have made themselves available to all of the attendees on this call. I do want to take the remaining time to go through some Q&A. Camille, I'm going to shift that over to you and see if you have any questions that have come in that you want to share with the team to be able to address.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Diann. We're getting several questions in through the Q&A about practical things that teams can try to implement if giving funds is not an option. So people are curious about learning more about virtual volunteer opportunities and pro bono work. How do people get connected with those opportunities? Where do they start? I think that would be helpful to dig into a little bit.
Should we just jump in?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm like, I have an answer. You know, we have links on our website that when people reach out to me personally or anyone on my team, we also have it in our Google search with keywords around virtual volunteering or skills-based volunteering, which is so important. We have links to the site with different ideas, thought starters that can really be sparked around how you can make a difference on a micro level and how you can make a difference on a macro level. But a big part of it, and I know Sue mentioned this, Ava mentioned it as well, is really understanding the need, which is the first place to start. It's one thing to have a willingness and desire to make a difference and make an impact, whether it be through giving of your time, giving of money, or just simple acts of kindness, but it's understanding the need, which is so critical. So I would say first, discover what you're passionate about, understand what the need is in the marketplace, whether it be in your local community or if you want to have a greater impact, you know, outside of your community. And then really put a bit of a plan against what it is you are prepared to do. Is it short term? Is it a once and done? And that's okay. Nobody's judging an act of kindness. If it's once and done, that's fine. If it's more longer term and you see the next year being something you want to commit to from a time standpoint, understand and recognize that first and what's important to you. Then go to those links and identify what seems to appeal to you, what is it you can give, whether it be your talent, your gift, your time, whatever it may be, and take it from there. There's so much out there, believe it or not, and people are really creative about how they can really make a difference depending on what the need is. So the resources are out there. I'm happy to send links. I know it's going to be in the handout that Diann has pulled together, but there's a lot out there, believe it or not, and it's definitely more than money. It's people being able to give in different ways and have a real impact.
Mm-hmm. I would add there too. I think again, if you think you know, if the employer can give you the support, that's great. Or if you want to do it on your own. And what Melissa said, and I often think about it, is you think about all the different ways you can exercise, and some work for you, some don't. And think about that as volunteering. There are some that might be more comfortable than others, and there's not a right or wrong, and there's not perfection in this. It's just really starting. And now I would say a couple of years ago, something personally that I felt was really pulling on my heartstrings as a leader in Silicon Valley on a leadership team. And I just asked the question of one of my mentors, and I said, I want to change the landscape. And he said, Sue, you need to put yourself in places that people don't look like you. So I took that challenge on. And through that, last year, I started mentoring at it's a national, it's build.org, because I have a real passion for education. I really believe that is, you know, that opens the gates up. And so I put a lot of our family time there, and build.org had to go through a pivot. So what it is, it's an entrepreneurial for underrepresented students. So I was working with freshmen that don't look like me, and I was able to give them leadership skills, mentorship skills, show up for them. And it was a year long, and I'm in a season of my life where I could do that, show up every Tuesday. But I would just say, you know, think about what works for your season in life, and that's going to change throughout. And then also, you know, don't be hard on yourself. If one volunteer doesn't work, it's okay. Then try something different. You know, there's not a right and there's not perfection. It's just being called to action. And if the easiest thing right now is putting a bag of groceries out on your doorstep so that a nonprofit or a local group can pick it up, that's an act of kindness. So even start small. If your time is limited right now, just start just start and start small and build on that.
Yeah. Great. And we do, like I said, have resources on the follow-up document of actual places you can go to, actual content for virtual volunteering and so forth, pro bono work. One question that came up, going back to, somebody mentioned surveying your stakeholders. Do you have any suggested survey questions we could use to gather feedback in a tactful way?
Sue, did you want to respond to that one? I know you mentioned about surveying.
Yeah, I think right now it's really, you know what, if you were an operator inside and if you're starting to hear it, I would just develop those questions. Like, do you want to see us providing you with places to serve? Do you have a need? And then do you want to see more corporate social justice coming? I mean, I think there's a couple of big pockets right now that you could begin to see what people are asking for right now. And so I haven't seen a survey. I can certainly ask and provide that back. I know when I was an internal operator, you know, we had a survey tool that would show us where we were not meeting the mark, and then we could drill down further what people wanted. So I think you could just do a quick Survey Monkey or something and just think about, you know, if you're thinking you want to do a survey, think what's propelling you to do that. You know, and it might be just who wants to get involved, and then get that group together and start a Slack channel and figure out what you can do and start to, you know, get the butterfly effect going.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that those are great, great idea starters to get into action. So Camille, do we have any more questions we have time to tackle, or did you need to transfer to housekeeping topics?
Yeah, we have just a couple more minutes and I want to be conscious of everyone's time, but maybe we can just do a quick round robin lightning round on what's one takeaway that the participants can take with them and implement at their company. Maybe we'll start with Avo.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I want to thank you, Camille and Diann, again for hosting us today. I'd say, you know, one thing, we're in a disaster now. One thing that companies can think about doing is planning for the next disaster and planning their social giving for the next disaster, so that they aren't flat-footed when it comes to where do I make my impact. And folks like us and Sue and other community foundations can help you design that, in addition to some of the other stuff mentioned, board placement, surveys, and so forth. So I'd say there's a lot we can do to prepare for the next one. And so that you can always do something. There's always something to do, including planning for the next one.
I would probably build on that. In fact, it was something that Avo said earlier around, you know, having a blueprint to do better and having those guidelines of, you know, what is really important, and putting that as a filter on what it is that you do and how you operate as a company, as an organization, and how you treat your employees. Or what you offer to your employees. But the blueprint is one thing. It's another to have the attitude of always wanting to do better, that it's never enough. There's always need for your support, for your support of employees, your support to your community and to your customers. You know, companies really are the holders of hope. They're the drivers of connection. They're really the drivers of positive social impact in so many ways. And like I said from the outset, employees really do count on their employers to help them make that difference. They want to, there's a desire to do it, but oftentimes they don't know where to start, and they are looking to their employers to guide them, both in their professional and their personal lives, because so much of their time is spent with their, you know, at work, with their colleagues or whatever it may be. So understand the role and responsibility, have that blueprint for always doing better, and don't wait for the next crisis to happen. Anticipate that there will always be a need, and being there for that need.
And Sue, I know you echo those very comments. Did you want to add anything else, or should we wrap it up?
I would just add one from the lens of a people leader. So for example, if you're not on the social responsibility committee, or you don't have one in your company, just remember, as a leader right now, again, just all the attributes that Melissa said an employer should have, that's what you should have as a leader as well. You should be able to be engage your people, help them find value, be agile, be creative, but take that responsibility and lead by example, and listen to them and just say, let's go out and let's do something collectively together. And And then again, people will feel much better, much more fulfilled, and they just might need that people leader to call them to action and start small. And then it really will build.
Love that. Okay. Thank you so much, Avo and Sue and Melissa and Mike for just sharing such rich content and emotions and resources. We're so grateful for you and for your time and sharing with us today. Camille, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Diann, for helping moderate this important discussion. I just wanted to call out that this session is in good company amongst about 15 other webinars that we've been running as part of our Grove Session series. All COVID-related topics related to how to support your employees' mental health, your parenting programs, onboarding strategies during social distancing, managing a distributed team. The topics go on and on. So I wanted to just call out that we have several recordings live on our Grove site. You can find them on sequoia.com/thegrove. And then this session was recorded, so we'll have it posted in the next 24 hours, again at sequoia.com/thegrove. I just wanted to say thank you again to our panelists and to Diann for facilitating the conversation, and to everyone who joined today's session. I know it's not an easy time for anyone, so thank you for spending your morning with us. We will continue to bring you content related to COVID-19 and how we can better serve our communities in the weeks and months to come. And just on behalf of everyone at Sequoia, please stay safe and healthy and join us again soon.